Hi, welcome back to the Power BI Custom Visuals class, and in this module we're going to be looking at the Beyondsoft Calendar. The Beyondsoft Calendar is a nice way to be able to visualize data across a single calendar month. So it allows you to take data that you have that's at a day level, or date level, and place it on a month calendar like you're seeing here. Okay, and again, it does do it across a single month, so you're not going to be able to see multiple months displayed here. It does allow you to actually add a single measure on top of that month as well. So you can actually see in this example on the screen here, there's a single value that's shown on each day, and you can do that on your examples as well, but you can only do a single measure. If you want to display more than one measure, then you can place those other measures into the tooltip option. And basically the tooltip option allows you to hover over any of those values and show you other supporting values that go along with it. Now, it does show, because it does only show a single month, if you want to see different months displayed on your report, then you'll want to do something like adding in a slicer, and that slicer would give you the ability to kind of toggle back and forth between each of the months and choose the month that you would like to be displayed on your report. Okay, so bring in a slicer or a filter of some kind and filter to the particular month that you care about. All right, so that's a brief overview. Let's actually walk you through how you can use the Beyondsoft Calendar, how to get started with it, and we'll walk through in our own example here. All right, so our first step is going to be to go get some data. Now, the data we're going to be using for this example is some daily sales results. So it's just sales data, but it's going to show it at a date level or a day level. And so what we're going to do is go up to the Get Data section here. We're going to select Excel and then choose Daily Sales Results and choose Open. Now, inside this file that I have, there is a spreadsheet in here called Sales. So we'll go ahead and select the sales results. You can see, again, the results are at a day level. Now, you could have it more granular than that if you had a transactional level, and it would actually roll it up to a day level once you put it in the calendar that we're going to look at. But in this case, it's already rolled up to a day level. Each of the transactions have been aggregated up or summed up to that particular day. So we can go ahead and hit load and bring this data now into the Power BI desktop. It's going to load it into our data model here. And then once we've done that, we can go ahead and select the custom visual that we want to use. Now to pick in and pull in the custom visual we want to use for this example, we can go up to the top ribbon here where it says From Store. And this will allow us to actually select or kind of filter through and find all the visuals that are available on the Office Store. The one that we want to choose, though, is the Beyondsoft Calendar. So I'm going to go ahead and just search for calendar here. And you can see there are a couple calendar visuals, but the one that we care about for this example is this one here called Beyondsoft Calendar. Go ahead and select Add to bring that into our example. And once that's now been imported in, we can get started. Now you can see on the right-hand side in the visualizations pane, the little calendar icon that indicates that it's been brought in and we can start to use it. I'm going to go ahead and select the Beyondsoft Calendar and make this take up a lot more of our screen here. And I'll start to place in some of the different fields that we have into this visual. Now, in the field well, you can see there is a date field, a measure data, and a tooltip section that we can apply our fields to. And so we're going to start with the date, and I'm going to drop the date into the field list, okay, underneath the date field. And you'll notice here that right now, because we don't have any measure data, it doesn't know what to display. So we need to bring in some form of measure data. I'm going to do that by bringing in the sales measures that I have. All right, so we can see a calendar that's been brought back. We're looking at January. So it started us off by looking at January here. And you can also see that if we wanted to bring in any other measure, say, for example, we want to bring quantity and display quantity on this as well, you'll notice that if you drop quantity into the measure data, that it just replaces the value that was there before. And that's because you can only have one value or one measure inside of the measure data section here. If you want to be able to display more than one measure, then I recommend that you go ahead and drop them into the tooltip section here. Like, for example, I can drop quantity underneath the tooltip section, and that way whenever I hover over a date, I can see that the quantity shows up as a tooltip, that little hover over you see here. And depending on the date that I'm looking at, I will see the values change based on the selection that I have. All right, now you might remember from the slides I talked about how you can only really see one month at a time. And I have data for multiple months here. If I go look at the data section here, you can see I have lots of data for multiple months, but it's only really displaying 1 month at a time. So if I want to be able to kind of toggle back and forth between the different months that I have, what I need to do is select somewhere in the background here and bring in a regular slicer that's within inside of the Power BI desktop. So I would select the slicer. I can go over here and find a field that I have called month year and drop that into the slicer. And you can see by default, the slicer tries to interpret this as a date value, and it tries to actually make this into a kind of a slider here. But what I'd like to do instead of a slider, because I really only want to select 1 month at a time, is I can go down here and I can tell it that I want to change this to a list view, and then it's going to show me a list of all the months. Now, Power BI automatically did some formatting on this, where it's tried to format this as a day of the week and then the first day of the month. Not really what I'm looking for. What I'd rather see here instead is the month and the year, and nothing to do with the date or the day of the month. So to fix this, I can select the month here, just in the field list here, go under to the modeling ribbon on the top, and you'll see there's a format section here, and I can change the format from the default one that it's selected to one that actually just has the month and the year. So I'm going to select the month and the year formatting right here, and then you can see that changes that nicely. Now, if I want to see the current month here, I can select August. That's my month as of the time of me recording this. Or I can select any one of these values here to be able to toggle back and forth between the different months that I have. Okay? All right, so that's nicely done. It looks good. I like the fact that I can kind of toggle back and forth now, and of course we can increase the text size of the slicer here if we wanted to make this a little easier to see. We could bump up the text size here a little bit underneath the field list. I'll bump that up just a tad. There we go. And I'll bring this over into the corner. All right, so let's now focus in on the calendar. So we're looking at the current month. We're looking at August 2017. Let's now focus in on some of the different things that we can do to toggle and play around with the values that we see here. So if I wanted to, what I can do, and actually it's time of me recording this, it's the end of the month. It's July 2017. But what I can do is I can make this a little easier to read. Right now, this calendar is a little bit difficult for me to read out what we're seeing here. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and select the calendar, and then I'm going to go over to the Format paintbrush here, and then underneath the Calendar Format section, I can do some interesting things. So let's look starting underneath the Calendar Format section, underneath the Format paintbrush on the right-hand side. Underneath the Calendar Format section, you first see that you have the ability to change the month and year display section here, and this has to do with what you see on the very top here. So right now it's showing month and year. You could change that to month only, so now it just says July. You could also tell it that you want to change it to show nothing. So it depends on what you want to show there. I'm going to leave that as month and year. I think that's kind of nice that way. But it's nice that you can see how that displays. The next thing you can change here is the weekday. So this is the weekday where you see Sunday, Monday, Tuesday abbreviated. Right now that's showing here as a short abbreviation of the month, the weekday. But you can change that here to a long definition of it, where you can see Sunday, Monday spelled out all the way. So that's kind of a nice change you can make there. You can also change the border thickness around each day, so maybe perhaps I want to increase the border thickness to 4-point thickness, so that's kind of nice. And you can also change the font weight as well. I recommend definitely changing the font size and the font weight. I'm going to bump this up to about 20 for the font size, okay, like so. And then I'm also going to change the font weight here as well. Now the font weight you might need to play around with a little bit because it's a little bit of an odd number for font weight than maybe you're used to. I'm going to make this something like 500 here, and you can see that it makes everything a lot more bold, a lot easier to see here, okay? So now you can very clearly see the month and the year, you can see the weekdays, and you can see the day number, very clearly here. You can also, though, if you wanted to, you can change the alignment. So if you wanted to switch the days to be aligned on the left instead of the right, you can change that. You can change the week alignment if you wanted to change that. It makes sense to be center aligned there. And you can also change the month alignment if you wanted to. If you wanted to push that over to the right, you could. All right, so that is the calendar format section. Let's go on to the next section here, the data color section. Under the data color section, you can actually adjust the colors that are shown on the report itself, on the calendar. Right now, it doesn't have any color. You can see right now it's showing no color here. But if we wanted to, maybe we wanted the minimum value to be something like a red. We can come in here and change that to red. And maybe the maximum value we wanted to be something like a green. And if there's a green I don't see that I like here, I can go to the custom colors and select my own green. And when you do that, you can see that it automatically adjusts the calendar now to show your values. So the lower the value, you can see is in red. The higher the value is in that brighter green. So this value is about 20,861, while this value is 4,363. This is one of my lower values. This is one of my higher values because this is a bright green. This is a bright red. Now you can also have this as you see there's a center color here where you can have some kind of a diverging value here. If you change this, say for example I selected like a yellow to be my middle value, you'll notice it doesn't do anything initially until you come up here and you actually select the diverging option. And when you select the diverging option, you'll actually see that it applies that yellow in the middle section here now to be able to apply that middle ground, okay? You can also come in and actually apply what you think those values should be if you wanted to. You can come in and apply what those values, where the breaking points are for each of those, the thresholds are. And then you can also come into where it says no data color, and you can determine if there was no data on a particular day, how would you want to show that? Right now it shows it's just white or clear, but you can change it to black, or if you like, you can change it to whatever you want. All right, moving along a little bit, let's go a little bit further down. Underneath the data labels section, if you go down to the data labels, you'll see there's a few other things here that are relevant. So the data labels have to do with the numbers that are in the middle. Right now, for example, we probably want to increase the size of that so we can actually read it. So let's bump that up to something like 15-point font, and let's increase the weight of that. Let's say something like 500. There we go. So now it's much easier to actually read that. You can also change the formatting here a little bit. If you wanted to change the decimal places shown, maybe I only really need to see 2 decimal places shown, I can adjust that. And now I can see those values displayed here correctly. I may also want to do something like turn the title off. It's kind of clear what this is. This is a calendar showing some sales values. I can turn this little title off that you see in the top left. If I wanted to, I can hit the title off here. And then I have kind of a nice looking little chart here. Nice looking calendar. And I can toggle back and forth between each of the days. I can see where my highest values are. And it's a really nice way to be able to visualize data across a calendar. Now, let's say, for example, I always wanted this chart to show the current date, and this current month. And I didn't want to have to use this slicer. Maybe I always just wanted to show the current month. Well, there's a way to do that, but it involves a little bit of DAX. And so what I'm going to show you here next is a small amount of DAX that allows you to return back a true or false, that's basically a true or false value. And if the value is true, it means it's the current month. If it's false, it means it's not the current month. And so to do this, we're going to need to write a little bit of a DAX query. It's going to be a calculated column. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to the modeling ribbon up top. You can also do this by right-clicking on the sales table, but I'm going to hit new column here. And this is a nice little tip to make this chart even a little bit better and this report a little bit better. And I'm going to paste in this little bit of code here, but I'll explain what it's doing. Let me explain what this code's doing. Basically, I'm creating a new column called current month, and I'm saying if the date column, so you'll notice it's referring to the date column that's in this data set, and I'm saying if the date column is equal to, and by the way, you can see I'm pulling down the date and saying just pull back the year out of the date. If the year from the date column is equal to the current year, then, actually there's a little bit more to this. It's also referring to the month. So right here you can see that it's saying if the month of the date column is equal to the current month, and you can see I'm wrapping this in an AND statement. So there's a couple ways you could have done this. I just chose to use the AND statement here, the AND function. So I'm saying AND, basically AND saying both of these have to be true. So the current year has to match the current year of today, and the date, or the month I should say, of my data set has to equal the current month of today. If the current month of my data set is equal to the current month of today, then I want to return back the value 1. If that's not true, return back 0. So basically, and I explained that poorly, but basically what it's saying is if my data matches the current month, okay, if my data set matches the current month, then return back a 1. If it doesn't, then return back a 0. So if I hit enter or return on this, by the way, you can pause the video if you want to look at this a little closer, but it's a fairly simple little statement here. There's a lot of different ways you could do this, but the goal of it is to return back a 1 or a 0, determining whether or not it is the current month. So if I hit enter on that, you can see it's going to create a new value here for me called current month. And if I go underneath the data section here, I can actually see that, and you can see it's 0 all the way down until I scroll down to, today is actually the day of me recording this, is the last day of July. So I can see right here that as soon as I get to July, that is the current month, and so it lights up a 1 next to each of those values when the July is the current month. As soon as it gets to August, and when the time changes to tomorrow, it's going to move and shift all of my 1s over to August whenever my data set is refreshed. All right, so if I go look at the report, I can see here, all I have to really do is bring this current month here in as a filter. And so what I can do is I can change this into like maybe a page filter or a report filter. I'm going to do this as a page filter. And that way I can tell it that all I want to do is return back as a basic little filter here to return back the 1s. 1 means it's the current month. You can see there's 31 days. There's 31 days in July. If I select 1, you'll see it automatically filters down to July. And frankly, I can delete the slicer altogether now if I wanted to. And it's only going to return back and show the current month here. So no matter what I had in the slicer, I can actually uncheck the slicer now because the slicer's not really even doing anything. I can even delete it if I wanted to. But that current month filter here is now always going to return back the current month on this visual. Now, if you don't want that to happen on anything outside of the calendar, then you can select the calendar and make sure that you only apply that filter on the visual. So I can, instead of having this as a page level filter, I can take this current month is 1, and I can place that into something like a visual level filter instead. So that's really up to you. If I wanted to, I could delete that. You can notice removing that filter now applies all the months, and I can place inside of a visual level filter to only show the current month inside of the calendar. Now with this done, let me select that correctly there. Now with this done, you can see July is shown here. It's disconnected from the slicer. The slicer's not really doing anything, so I can delete that now. I'll go ahead and do that. And then I'm always going to show the current month here. Now if you happen to open this file when there's no data in that month, so say for example I have only 2017 data and I go into 2018, this chart's going to show up blank. So keep that in mind if you happen to open this at a later point and it doesn't actually work. It might be because there's no data beyond 2017 in this data set. Well, that's it for this one. An interesting little tip there with the current month thing that we showed at the end, but really the focus here on the Beyondsoft calendar, really interesting visual. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and look forward to showing you the next custom visual in my next video. Thanks a lot.